Thank you.
Thank you for an excellent presentation. I feel like I have an honorary degree in philosophy just by listening and attending, so I could listen to philosophy all day long.
Good.
Bitcoin audiences are famous for asking great questions. So we have people with microphones that are in the back if you want to ask any questions. I want to start and ask a question of my own, though, after listening to your presentation. I was wondering if you could explain for us and for the audience here, how did your business change at Overstock when you started accepting Bitcoin? Give us an idea of like what, in a day-to-day way, what changed? What were some of the things that you experienced through customer support questions? Did you get new media attention, for instance?
Yes. Well, this story is worth telling. On December 19th, a journalist called me and said, in a long interview on other subjects, mentioned, do you think you'll take Bitcoin? And I'd been keeping an eye on Bitcoin for a few years. By the way, I did my doctorate in philosophy, but along the way I studied computation theory at Stanford and Gödel and the math that underlies crypto. And so when Bitcoin first came along, it sparked an interest. I recognized it as being based on the stuff I had studied 25 years earlier. So I had this affection for it. I was waiting to see what the feds were going to do. They seemed to green light it around November, or at least they said they're not going to red light it. At December 19th, a journalist calls me and says, and in the space of an interview on other subjects, says, you're going to take Bitcoin. And I said, well, maybe by the end of 2014. And I just said it off the top of my head. Well, that mention, I started seeing showing up in Korea and Japan, and these newspapers all over the world were reporting that I had said we might take Bitcoin. So I called Coinbase, just looked them up. They sent someone out. We had one or two conversations on the phone. They sent someone out. On January 2nd, they sent someone out. On January 9th, we were live. So we had a fantastic experience with Coinbase. I also happen to know BitPay. I hear the same kinds of story about BitPay, so I don't want to disrespect anybody here. But I know that those are both excellent organizations with great backers. And they got us live so quickly. And the truth is after we got it live, well, there were two phases. One was just getting it live, and the second phase, there's three phases. Getting it live, being able to issue returns when customers buy a podium and they return it, you want to give them their money back if they paid in Bitcoin and they want it back in Bitcoin. That was the second phase. And the third phase is having our international checkout process be able to accept Bitcoin. Well, we got the first phase live in a week. We got the second phase live a month or two ago, so we can now issue refunds in Bitcoin. I think we're still a month or so away from international orders being able to pay in Bitcoin, which of course distresses me. But so it was, since we got it live, it's been so seamless, haven't had to give it a second thought. There's been no problem. I know I sound like a commercial, but it's required no work from any of us. We've had to retrain some customer service agents on now how to issue Bitcoin refunds, but it's just a few minor things like that. We have I think we're coming up on $2 million worth of sales, which is nice. We'll do $1.5 billion this year. I expect we'll do 10-ish in Bitcoin. And that's nice. It's growing steadily each month.
Did you get any new press from the branding?
Yes. Well, once we did it, and once we went live, yes, as you may have, it became this, I couldn't believe the amount of, I could not believe, it paid for itself, the implementation 100 times over just by the press. And I really want to express my gratitude to the Bitcoin community. What apparently happened was, as I hoped would happen, the early adopters out there, the Bitcoin users, started coming to our site and just as a show of support and buying a set of pillows or buying a bed. And we sold, a few 100,000 just in the first 2 days after getting live, just people wanting to show their support.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, let's see if we have any questions in the audience. We'll start here. Do we have the microphone?
So if Bitcoin does undermine these central institutions you're talking about, what's the best possible scenario? What does your rosy picture of the future look like?
Well, my rosy picture of the future would be that the bezel gets squeezed out of society like the toothpaste out of a tube of toothpaste. That is slowly and steadily, with no major dislocations, everything gets filled in. That would be my rosy picture. My guess is it's hard to imagine this technology is so disruptive. It's hard to imagine it doesn't disrupt something deep along the way. But it couldn't happen to a nicer set of people. I know that it would be bad if it happens, but anything's better than the system, at least in the United States, the system of knuckleheads. We basically live in an oligarchy now in the United States. There's a wonderful economist, Simon Johnson, was the chief economist of the IMF, now he's a professor at MIT, and he has said publicly, look, what I used to deal with at the IMF, going to Argentina or Russia or Indonesia and sitting across from some young, bold leader, and it's always a new, young, bold leader. These oligarchies always get themselves, the elites leverage themselves up too much, they crack, and the government bails them out. Then the IMF comes in, and the government wants more money, and they say, and we need to figure out, are you in Argentina, are you going to use this money to fix things, or are you just going to keep on bailing out your elites? Well, I, Simon Johnson, says he, am telling you that's all that's happened in America, that you've become an oligarchy. I think the history of the United States can be told as a war between two factions, Wall Street and Washington. I can personally attest, having been on the front lines of this, and I knew this 10 years ago, long before it became common knowledge, Wall Street has Washington under its thumb. And to the extent I'm actually surprised that we all didn't get outlawed a few years ago by Washington. Obviously, Russia and China and other autocratic states are going to do it, but I'm surprised that Washington, maybe it just got away from them. But I think that their day is really going to be ruined. If Bitcoin or crypto takes off, if we start seeing cryptographic ways of transferring securities, and I know there are people here like Next working on that. There's other organizations working on taking this technology and applying it to capital markets, not just currency, but capital markets. Because I believe the bezel is so enormous and is so much worse a problem than is generally understood, I think that this kind of alternative technology is going to have a more dramatic effect than is generally understood, because people don't recognize how big a problem is there.
My name is David Orban, and I believe that what you said is very true regarding the distributed systems that are substituting centralized systems. And crypto is just one component in this. Energy produced by solar is distributed, 3D printing and manufacturing, food production, health, learning, all are part of the same process. And the nation state is being undermined by this. But the nation state is also reacting as an immune system trying to protect itself. So you seem to be an optimistic revolutionary, but revolutions are always started by optimists and then they become bloody.
Bolsheviks take over.
and what comes out of it at the end is impossible to control. The well-being of billions of people is at stake here.
What's the question?
What can we do concretely to stop policymakers from making it bloody and taking over the revolution?
Well, I think you've analyzed it right. And listen, I have so many scars from I sat there in the halls. The answer is nothing. I think the answer is you're not going to do anything to stop. You're not going to get anything to make government make the right choice. Let me tell you, in 04, 05, I had concrete data, proof. I had people involved. I had hoodlums from Staten Island, another Dutch name, Staten Island, who were going and willing to talk to, the SEC with me, to NASDAQ, and explain what was going on. and to the Senate Banking Committee and the House Financial Services and financial journalists in New York. I'm reminded of another Bertrand Russell story. Bertrand Russell was once famously, he was in India, and he was lecturing on Einstein's relativity, and a Hindu cosmologist stood up in the back of the audience and said, "Professor Russell, you have it wrong. The universe rides on the back of a turtle." And Russell said to the Hindu professor, "Well, what's the turtle ride on?" And the guy says, "The back of another turtle." And Russell says, "Okay, what's that turtle ride on?" The fellow says, "I'm sorry, Professor Russell, it's turtles all the way down." Well, listen, we had clear proof that there were these flaws in the settlement system, that there were brokers wildly misrepresenting. Basically, it was fractional reserve banking without a reserve requirement. We had participants, we had data, we had economists. We went to NASDAQ, we went to the SEC. I was warned, if you keep pushing this, Byrne, you're going to become the target of a federal investigation. I said, you got to be kidding me. This isn't some schmuck country. You don't get. I pushed it. I became the target of 6 federal investigations over 10 years, all of which went nowhere, all of which cost millions of dollars, fought. They gave up, they dropped, they give me a letter saying they were wrong, and 3 months later, they start another investigation. And we later used Freedom of Information Act requests to find out that there were Wall Street. Anyway, I digress. I went to NASDAQ, the SEC, the Senate Banking, the House Financial Services, and the New York Financial Press, trying to alert them and explain to them there's systemic risk being created by this. There's latent derivative risk that people don't understand is there, because when you have unsettled trades, it's like a contract, it's like a type of derivative called a contract for difference, but one with this pernicious circular effect. We could explain this, had all this data, we got nowhere. And I found it was just turtles all the way down. It's turtles, all the establishment that you think is overseeing these centralized institutions. In the US, it's called the DTCC. And expecting them to be doing their job. They're not doing this. And listen, I'm reporting from the front line. I spent 2004 to 2008 in this battle. And millions, it became my hobby. This is how I became the scourge of Wall Street, trying to expose this stuff. So I could give you some happy talk that says, if there's this disruption, this is what you can do to convince the governments. You can't. The governments they don't care, or they don't understand. The people you're up against, you got to remember, the people you're up against all have senators on speed dial. And I mean, I faced this myself. I used to go in and talk to senators, and they would say, and I would explain everything, and I would bring economists to explain stuff, and I would finish. The aide to the senator would tell me on the way out, what you say makes sense, but every time you're here, Goldman Sachs is here 10 times, telling them not to listen to you. So I think I could give you some happy talk saying you're going to make a difference with the government. You're not. I think the one thing that happened to our benefit is this got away. It got away from them. I don't think it's normally aggravating how slow the U.S. federal government can be to see something and understand it and respond. But for once, it helped our side, because this came along. And I think that if really everybody had been on their game, they would have stopped Bitcoin 2 years ago. It's gotten away from them. It's too late now. I don't think they can, but I don't think there's anything you're going to be able to do to bring this in for a soft landing. If the system is really at its core as corrupt as I believe it is, then as Bitcoin gets adopted, it will cause severe dislocations. I think what you're doing, though, is creating a robust parallel system to which people can quickly switch. And I think that's really about all you can do.
Do we have another question?
Thanks for the great speech. I think as a Bitcoin user, of course, you expect a stable currency, and Bitcoin is fluctuating very much. It's pretty volatile for the moment. And I'm from China, and I see in China, Chinese government has not been very supportive for the digital currency, and the trading volume is very big in China. And my question is, how do you see the fluctuation rate of digital currency in the future, and how do you think the government policy is going to affecting digital currency and your business? Thank you very much.
同志，这个问题特别聪明啊，谢谢。对我来说 ，well, for the, I'd say that the first, I know that China. Well, I thought they outlawed it, although I keep seeing these indications that it's not really outlawed. I don't quite understand. The fluctuation risk, there's a saying on Wall Street, liquidity begets liquidity. Once you start having liquid enough exchanges, it will draw, there's network effects. There's network effects that come to play and more. The problem is you don't have a liquid enough market now, and that's why there is this volatility. It's hugely ironic that I'm the guy saying this, but anyway. We ourselves at Overstock don't expose ourselves to much of it. We trade out. We started off trading out instantly from 100% of our Bitcoin transactions. Then I felt that was kind of cheating, and I wanted to accumulate some Bitcoin. So now we accumulate about 10% of all the Bitcoin spent on our site. We're accumulating. But the fluctuation problem is a real problem for businesses. And I think it's also going to, I was just speaking with someone earlier today who said, well, when the price of Bitcoin comes down, fewer people come in and sign up for new wallets. And then when it goes up, more people come in and sign up for wallets. That may be, and I'm sure that's true, on balance, all the volatility is probably discouraging people. However, the only way we're going to get there is eventually enough early adopters adopt, and there starts being enough liquidity, and then the liquidity begets liquidity, and then things should start. You shouldn't have the kind of volatility you have now in Bitcoin. But Mike, I don't follow it like I probably should, but my understanding is the last couple months, the volatility is somewhat smoothed out. And I would imagine just as more people buy into it, that you'll see that'll happen more. And when somebody develops, I don't know if anyone developed yet, we would use it if it were a service, a way to hedge your Bitcoin risk. So you don't trade out of it so much as buy various puts and such. You buy forward contracts. But I mean, that's enough. I'm trying to indicate areas that would be good business for entrepreneurs to develop. One would be, and I know there are people working on it, Bitcoin version of a stock market. Another is a Bitcoin, a derivative market where a good derivative market where businesses could hedge through options out of their Bitcoin risk. Third, incidentally, is micropayments. I think that Bitcoin could solve. The publishing industry has been wrecked in the last 15 years. People want to charge subscriptions, or they want to charge for content, or they go to advertising-based models. There's very few publications who can really, am I singing your song here or something? Are you? Okay, there's very few publications that can really charge online subscriptions. But what I imagine is a world where you go to a newspaper and it's, to read some article is 3 cents. Everyone's going to pay 3 cents to read it. And if they did that, it could save the publishing industry. Anyway, I think those are the three areas that if I were interested in getting and starting another company, that's what I'd be doing. But the point is, as more participants come in, the volatility should smooth out.
Okay. We need a microphone up here, please. And then we have time for one more question. Right up here. I'm sorry. Can you stand up, please? Yeah.
Hi, I'm Brian Crane of Epicenter Bitcoin. So you talked a lot about dismantling of centralized organizations. Now, I'm curious, is there a role for, in some contexts, where centralized organizations are superior to decentralized systems? Or are you worried that, Overstock being a large centralized organization as well will be, dismantled or replaced by decentralized applications in the future?
Fair question. No, it's not that I'm against all centralized institutions. I think that there are efficiencies that come. Every corporation, by its nature, is kind of a top-down economy. There are problems when organizations get too big that are not subject to market pricing internally. But no, I'm not an anarchist like some of you. I think there's a role for government. I think there's a role for centralized institutions. But just as the left, when I was in academia, the left tended to be obsessed with the idea of market failure. Guys like Paul Krugman, Joseph Stiglitz, good guys. Well, Stiglitz is. They love exploring the ways markets can fail. And markets do have natural tendencies to fail. There are certain types of goods that are not best left to the market. But you always got to ask the question, compared to what? Governments have ways of failing too. There are certain standard ways that government choice fails. And one of them is through capture. And so in designing, by the way, I say this not as, I'm a small L liberty guy. I'm not right wing or left. But when people on the left talk about the need to have a robust, muscular government that can stand up to these powerful corporations like Goldman Sachs, they fail to consider the possibility that what happens when your muscular government becomes a wholly owned subsidiary of Goldman Sachs. Now you got the worst of both worlds. So I'm not against all centralized institutions. I just think in the design of institutions, we have to take more consideration of the risk of their capture. And all else being equal, you want peer-to-peer institutions where consent plays a role rather than submission. So thank you, John.
Thank you. Wait, can you take one more question?
Sure.
Okay, I think
absolutely.
we have a question over here. Was there one more?
I'll stay here all day. But I know you got a schedule.
Hi, my name is John Lay. I'm really curious, when is Overstock going to move their shares over to the blockchain?
Funny you say that. I want to be, if I say this now, it's gonna get reported, and then 3 days from now, I'll have guys locked in a room eating pizza and making it happen. It's what I said to some journalists. We put 40 people in a room, slid pizzas under the door, they got it done in a week. Funny you say that. I want to be the, I would consider issuing a security just to get the first Bitcoin security or blockchain security out there. I'm also exploring the possibility, we're listed on NASDAQ, but can we be dual listed it's possible in the States, you can have stock dual listed on more than one exchange. You can list it, it's listed on NASDAQ, it's listed in Berlin, it's listed in the Bahamas exchange for, I don't know why, somebody went to not me, somebody out there in the Bahamas went to the trouble to get it done. I believe we could list on a blockchain kind of exchange. And I have some lawyers in the stages, they're talking to two different parties. And if anyone here has a technology or has a solution, call collect. But I would love to be, at the very least, to take our current NASDAQ traded security and dual list it. And I would also be interested, I'm going to get excoriated by the lawyers, but in issuing a bond or something that we could list as be the first to list this kind of security. So call collect.
Good. I think
I noticed some people in their blogs, when I first came out and did this, some people said, this guy just did this stuff with Bitcoin for publicity. I'm hoping, if nothing else, this talk dispelled. You understand this is a deep part of my life, what you folks are doing.
And I think that's an excellent note to end on, so let's hear it again for Patrick Byrne. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Excellent talk.
Thank you.